Thanks for coming. This is beyond HTML, the next generation of law school websites. And let me tell you, the history of this program is when I first started thinking about doing this, we had just completed a few really interesting projects, a couple of which you see today. And one of them, for example, was done in PHP and XML. I thought, wow, this is just so super cool. And, I hadn't really seen a lot of other people doing it, so I thought, wow, we can build some really cool stuff. And the more I thought about it, all of you are doing really cool stuff too. I mean, this is not that cutting edge. PHP's been around a long time. I'm looking forward to a pretty intense Zoom presentation. and so, there are a lot of really cool technologies out there. And so, like, my talk kind of shifted a little bit, and what I really thought might be more interesting than what we're doing, maybe a little bit different from other people, is how we handle the content aspect. So that's what most of this talk is going to be about, is the content aspect and how the rest of it, the technical design, all of that really should serve the content. Okay? So it's a slightly different approach than what we probably used to say. So, I've been taking random surveys of people. I've probably hunted a few down. Asking you, what are you doing with your website? Who makes the decisions? How are things done? And what's your next step? So I would say, for most people, the next step has been implementing some sort of content management system. I think this is pretty big. We're all IT folks, and I'm strange when I'm kind of preaching to the choir. Kind of making our own lives easier, right? So that we don't have to get involved in the content process as much. It doesn't have to be software necessarily. You don't have to implement a vignette. It could just be a process that you've implemented that makes sense, that's easy to use. It could just be a series of templates. But at any rate, I'm hoping that all of you have started down this road. So the bigger question is, how do you determine what content actually goes in? And the corollary, who decides what goes in? And I think what's happened at most law schools is that the departments have kind of driven their own sites. So I don't know if yours is like this, but the admissions department would come to us and say, well, we'd really like to do this. And we do. Oh, and the career services would come to us and say, we'd really like to do this. We do too. And the problem is that all these ideas, while great individually, may or may not fit with the overall goal of the website. That's something to think about. So, what we've sort of done is kind of change how we approach it. And this is kind of June's theory on how content should be handled. It's called the goal-oriented approach. Thanks, June. Christy, you guys came to that. And so it's a totally different concept. Instead of approaching it from what content should go in and letting people dictate to you, I think you should look at it from the bigger picture, which is, what are you trying to accomplish with your website in the first place? And, when I mention goals, what I mean are strategic goals, not technical. So, yes, one goal is making it easy to use, but that's not a bigger picture. So, I'm looking for big picture, strategic things that the law school is trying to accomplish. Now, these are just some possible goals that I'm going to throw out there. These are goals that we've sort of implemented. The biggest one is to expand our web audience. And the reasoning behind that is that we are trying to reach a wider audience. It's more cost effective than trying to print thousands of brochures and mail them out. Now the problem is you can't just suddenly decide, I'm going to bring in more people. You have to have goals for each one of those target groups. What's going to bring those people in? And secondary to that, how are you going to use design? How are you going to use programming to support bringing in that new audience? So, marketing. I know it's a horrible thing, but it's really quite important, and it's probably one of the primary reasons you have a website to think about this, right? An important thing that I don't think a lot of schools are doing is coordinating the communications or PR efforts of the law school with the website. I know some of you are. I'm Wayne. What I see happening is that the marketing published materials that go out don't necessarily match the design or the themes that you have coming out of the website. So this is something that's, I think, number one, really important. You've got to get your messages correct. They have to be the same, no matter what medium they're coming out of. And this is something that has to be coordinated. This is another issue that came up for us, was that, you know, when the University of Texas, our color is orange. Not a lot of people like orange. And when we first started going through and putting together a new design, we brought in an outside design firm. Nobody wanted orange because we were all really sick of it, and everybody wanted blue or some really nice color. And we had this beautiful blue design, and the law school hired this new marketing person, and she came in and said, "You are running away from your brand. You can't do that. This is University of Texas. It's got to be orange." And so now you see we have this lovely orange brand that's everywhere. But branding is really important. It can really make a difference. And I guess the best thing is it makes your design decisions a lot easier. And for you as the creator, it makes design decisions a lot easier. So, who is your audience? What are your goals? These are some of the goals and audiences that we just decided to try and bring in. Now, the no-brainer is prospective students. We have number one audience. Easy. I don't think you really have to do anything to bring them in. They're going to look at your website. The other ones that are harder, general public, alumni, current students, faculty, staff, and admitted students. These are the ones that we target. So number one, general public. Our goal was to create positive PR for law school. And translated, that means increased reputation score for the university. I'm sure you all understand that. This is how we did it. Number one, news releases. And once again, we were fortunate that we hired this fabulous communications team. It was this woman who actually happened to be married to one of our law professors, but she's a Harvard MBA. She used to work at USA Today. We hired, her assistant is somebody who graduated from law school, our law school. She worked at the Washington Post and where else? She's worked in a lot of really big news organizations. So this is our communications team, and they're fabulous. So what they did was they started releasing news releases. And what we found is that when we started finding our stories in newspapers, it was really wild. Just pick up the Austin American-Statesman and wow, look, there's our news story right there. Almost verbatim sometimes. So if you think that people aren't reading this, you are very wrong. As long as you change it often enough, people will come back again and again. And you know, we were in kind of an probably an unusual situation because of the Enron business, but it kind of brought home the fact that we really needed to do more of this stuff. The news stories are very popular. We get about 300 per week. We use it in a variety of ways. We put it on the RSS channel, which goes on to the PHP portal, which was right there yesterday. And it's read by a wide variety of people. We had one story about, we have one law professor who's rather infamous for his own little, I think he's called it EQR, some sort of equality rating. And it's kind of his version of U.S. News, except based on equality of faculty rankings. And he wrote this whole big article about why U.S. News was useless. And that story got about 1,000 hits a week. So these things are really popular, and it's, it takes some time. But from my standpoint, it was easy because I put the story up. But from the communications point of view, they had to keep putting the story up. One of the things I had on my previous slide was that news organizations were checking it on a regular basis. And I don't just mean Austin, American Statesman. We had USA Today, we had all of these news organizations, and if we didn't have a story up in time that they expected, they would actually call and yell at us for not having it up. So, and in fact, several times that happened to us, where we had a famous judge who came and spoke, and they wanted to see the video. We had to put the video so these news organizations could watch the video. So, very popular. And the other thing is, they view these websites for this type of information. And this is something that's really simple. And yet, as I look at other law school websites, a lot of your news stories don't provide a PR contact. Big problem. What if they want more information? What do they call? Even if you don't have a specific communications person, you should have somebody in charge of this story so that they know who to call. And inbound PR is much cheaper than outbound, which means if these news organizations are checking your website, it costs you almost nothing. But for you to send out paper releases to all of these organizations, a lot of money. So I thought I'd give you an example of something that happened to us. As you know, Dean Blaine Powers, I love the Dean, was on the board for Enron, and he was in charge of releasing the board's report. The actual report was released. There were a lot of calls for him to resign. He was getting a lot of bad press, that he wanted to write anything that was useful, biased, blah, blah, blah. And right before the report was released, our communications department released a new section about our website, about our dean. Here we go. And basically, it's just about what human being he is and all the great things he does, and has been shaking hands with all sorts of really great people. So as you can see, this is Ron Kirk over there, who's currently running for U.S. Senate. This is Rodney Ellis, Texas Senator. And this is one of the Texas Supreme Court justices. So we got these stories up there a couple of days before the actual report was released. And this is what happened afterwards. So the report was actually released. This is the kind of story that started coming out. My favorite line here is about, let's see, the minister of his church was talking about how popular his class is at church. The Sunday school class is a standing room only. And what's interesting about this is if you read through this, a lot of the facts actually came from our website. So if you think people aren't reading it, you're very mistaken. Alumni and friends. Big topic. This is money for the law school. So the idea was to encourage a sense of community through more participation and involvement, and of course, increased donations. And these were the ideas that we had. We haven't actually implemented a lot of them, but some of them we have. Annual fund online class competition. We actually have a database that tracks all gifts that are given to the law school. And what we did was we put a web front end on it. The web front end sorts by class, so anybody can go in by class and see how much money the class is giving. And it's not, I think it's mostly percentage of class. We can have a lovely little UT tower with a little, thing going up, so the more money your class gives, the more orange your tower is. And if you know anything about UT, the orange tower is a good thing. So, you know, it's important. You've got to do these kinds of things to bring that audience in. Current students, staff, and faculty. This is kind of a tough one because they're already here. And once again, I've heard this said in other presentations that they view the website as purely PR, which they're right. And but there are things that we can do with it, like putting stuff in our portal, for example, which I still consider our website, that will help them. So part of that is the portal stuff, timesheets, parking, sign up, course registration. All of that is web-based. And we try to organize our information for our processes. So for example, I don't know if you saw yesterday, we showed our student web page, which is organized by processes. So for example, when they take classes, these are all the things they need for their classes, exams, grades. These are all things that they can look up online. They can even pay their bills. And when we changed this design, which was, do you remember when that was, Mark? About a month ago?
Yeah.
We went from about 4,000 hits a week to 9,000 hits a week on this thing. So students are using it, or somebody's using it. I can't really tell who's using it because we have terrible stats, but we have 9,000 hits a week on this every week since we put it up. So for admitted students, at the University of Texas, we have way too many students applying. We really don't want more. So you know, for us, we don't want more people applying. But what we did want was to increase the yield. So of the ones that applied, we wanted the best of the bunch that we would select first to actually come. So that was the goal, increase the yield. And then once they actually were admitted, we were also trying to better the communications process between us and them. We were tired of sending out, I'm sure you all do this, the welcome packets and this letter and that letter. And we wanted to eliminate as much of that as we could. We also wanted to eliminate millions of calls to our admissions office. Fortunately for us, we already had a custom-built admissions system that tracked all applicants. So the minute somebody sends in an application, it goes into our admissions system, and the admissions system starts sending out emails that say, such and such is due at this date, don't forget to send it, happy birthday. All sorts of emails that are reminders. In fact, one of our next projects is to build a prospective, an applied students portal so that they can see exactly what their deadlines are, kind of give them a little checklist of what they need to send us. But anyway, that was all implemented in something we call Fresh Law Central. Let me show you Fresh Law Central. There were two goals for Fresh Law Central. One was a purely PR model. We want you to come because we're such a great place. And then the second goal, of course, was increased communication, right? Get information out. So when we first set this up, it was actually a publicly available site. I don't know if any of you saw this. Because the stories that we were putting up were purely PR, and really, we got a lot of mileage out of these stories. So here's a story. This was actually one of the last ones we did about this woman, this former law student. But just to give you an idea, this is one of the ones that we did. And I won't bore you with the whole thing, but just to give you an idea of some of the things that we were working with. Oh, sorry, I don't have volume. didn't hook up video. You know, it's not really exciting, but I think it's better than just the plain text. And it's somewhat interesting. It involved about 3 or 4 hours of work.
They're not either
possibly
one.
more, but well, we videotaped her for about an hour, and then we had to edit it back down. The editing back down was a lot more work than I thought it would. But this was really popular. And what's great is we can repurpose this now for our regular admissions website. So we can use the same story and video in other locations. And then we have this special admitted students only section. And a couple things. The reason we did this was, first of all, we wanted to point out to them, you're an admitted student, you're really special. Look, you can get into these areas that nobody else, unwashed, cannot get into. So that was part of it. And then the biggest section was this discussion board. When we started this, we weren't really sure what to expect, but we stuck it out there and thought, we'll see what happens. Maybe no one will use it. And we were greatly surprised. About 20% of the students actually ended up posting something on the website itself. Obviously, a great deal more just actually read the site. As you can see, the kind of questions really varies. I think this is the most interesting one.
Thanks for opening the door.
So the students can post their own questions, but we also had a variety of other people monitoring this. And basically, the admissions staff, we have some special students called SIROC, the Student Recruitment Orientation Committee. There are about 40 of them, but only about 20 of them were allowed into the site. And they were asked to respond as current students to give their own personal advice about this. And the questions were great. I mean, things that you would just never imagine. Like, for instance, students with families.
That never happened.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to get answers to some of these. You don't really know who to ask. Summer programs for children. I want to enroll my child in a summer camp. Where do I go? Student housing, really popular. What areas should I live in? Is this a good condominium complex? I need a roommate. So really good questions, and we were very surprised at the quality of these questions. General questions, all sorts of stuff. Do I need to buy a laptop? One big thing that's been happening lately is, I live in Houston. Anybody else want to get together on this date and meet? And several of them have. So like here at Houston get together. There's one in Austin in a couple of days. So the students are kind of forming their own community and getting together, which is the whole purpose of the website. Just kind of build a sense of community, of belonging. They belong to the University of Texas. You will come. And this was very popular. And I think everyone was really surprised at how well this worked. Financial aid website was answered by just the financial aid people. We also had a roommate database, and go back to that. So we had a roommate database, which I unfortunately can't show you because I'm not actually a student. I can't get in. It's a really good control here. You can update your address online. I think one of the biggest problems with students is that they move over the summer and then you lose them. This is one way that we can get them to update their own addresses. They can check their own financial aid status online, and they can submit questions. And then there's contact information. So this has been really great for us. In fact, the latest iteration of it is this. And what's happened is, we figure by now, most students have decided whether or not they're going to come. So the PR purposes have really kind of ended at this point. And we're purely in communication mode. So what we're trying to do now is just tell the students what they need to know. So obviously, parking at UT Law. Basically, really hard to do. As it is in most big universities. So, the answer is, best place to park is at home. So, and we're going to have weekly stories now. So every Friday, we're going to put up a new story, and it'll be informational, directed at admitted students, and hopefully in time to get them here. Biggest part of this is going to be orientation information, what you need to know to get through orientation, when is it, what's the schedule, registration for some of the events. There are going to be lots of events. In fact, we're bringing in the Boards, a very famous Austin band, to perform at one of our dinners, the alumni dinner. So it's an exciting time for us, but we're going to put all of that online, and it's easily accessible. One of the questions that always comes up is, well, what if somebody doesn't have access? And I would say we have not gotten a single complaint about putting everything online. These are young kids for the most part. They all have access. If not, they go to the public library, and we've just not gotten any complaints at all. Not a concern. Almost all of them have email addresses. In fact, I think, do you have any idea what the percentage is?
It's going to be about 98, 97, 98%.
So we have email addresses for all of these students. And our system is smart enough that when it does issue an email, it knows that if there's no email address, they kick out a paper copy that gets sent out. So we have contingency. Okay, so that's Fresh Law Central. Now the results were, we got about 1,600 to 1,800 hits a week. Over half were direct hits, which means that they knew what the URL was and they went directly to the site. So it wasn't that somebody just through SMW happened to cross it. As I said, the discussion board was just about 20% of the admittees. We had, although I know many schools did, a record number of applicants, the highest ever in the history of the University of Texas. But the biggest difference, I think, is that the yield went up by over 20%. And statistically, because the numbers went up so high, that the yield should have fallen, and it did not. It went up 20%. But from what I understand, most schools, the yield only went up about 10%. So ours is kind of unusually high, which has interesting side effects now. But the number of phone calls to admissions dropped dramatically. I mean, by over half. They just ceased getting calls, especially of the where do I live, where do I park, those kinds of questions that you repeat over and over and over. Those calls dropped dramatically. There are other possible reasons. All this happened. The economy is bad. The dean became famous. But I'd like to think, one of those reasons is because we did this whole PR campaign with Fresh Law Central, specifically to increase the yield of admitted students. Okay, so design. I'm just going to briefly go over some of these things. Design obviously should reflect our marketing goals. Usability, very important. In fact, almost more important than the design itself. And Jacob Nielsen's Use It website is really great if you've already looked at it. He has a great article about this. But one of his comments is, for example, as a usability example, if you wanted to buy a Ford Fiesta or whatever,
oh,
where are you going to get Escort? I don't know.
Focus, please.
Okay, I'm from Texas. Ford was an F-150.
Tandem, come on.
So if you want to find out more about the Ford F-150, where are you likely going to find more information more easily? From the Ford website or the Edmunds? And funny enough, the Edmunds website is far superior to the Ford website. You cannot get the kind of detailed information that you can in Edmunds. And this says a lot about the usability of the Ford website. You're more likely to find better information somewhere else. So keep that in mind. Usability is really important.
Well, that's because Ford wants to sell you a car. They don't want to give you knowledge about a car. Really, it's the purpose that controls there.
That may be. The other advice I have is get professional assistance. I've seen so many websites. And it doesn't even have to be, we hired a design firm, and it cost us thousands of dollars, but we ended up with a beautiful site that we can really work with. You don't have to hire a designer. Just, you're at a university. There are thousands of little graphic design students running around. Hire one of them. There are people out there who are good at this, and your web programmer may or may not be that right person. Just hire a student part-time. I mean, they're not that expensive. And you'll end up with a much better project. In fact, some of the projects I've seen that were better were actually done by students. Users? Because they have time. So, anyway, this little piece of advice.
And the other thing is your site really a product of that full-time designer that you hired?
We didn't hire a full-time designer. We hired a design firm with the specific goal of coming up with a usable look and feel and front page for our design.
So they were more consultant in a way.
They were more consultants. They came in, they talked to us about our goals, what we wanted, our branding, what we wanted to project, and we brought in all the deans. Everybody had a say, and this is. Well, it's not exactly what they came up with, because the first design was blue, as I said, but they were very good. And when the new person came on, they were very cooperative in giving us orange design. So it was a wonderful process. I mean, I think we wanted tabs. So my webmaster and I, we sat down and we made little tabs. And they were okay. They weren't bad. But then we gave it to the designers, and they came back and just, oh, that's what tabs are supposed to look like. So I think those little differences can make a big change. The other thing is, update and refresh your design regularly. A lot of law school websites don't change much from year to year. And a lot of people have the same design that they had 5 years ago. The problem is the expectations for design are different. I threw David Siegel on here because whenever it was like 5 years ago, the cool thing was to have this front page that had no information on it whatsoever, but was really cool looking. And nobody does that anymore. I mean, it's just a useless piece of information. It's kind of like today's Flash. You get those little Flash intros. Extraordinarily annoying. Okay, so I was fortunate enough to go to an Edward Tuffy seminar, and for those of you who don't know who he is, he's kind of the god on information design and display. The display of information. And he really has almost, his whole emphasis is not on web stuff itself. It's really on information in general, in any form. Although he does have kind of a bias towards people. But these are just some of the points that I took away from it. Content is #1 element. If you have bad content, it won't matter if you've got a cool design. Technology should always serve content. That's kind of the whole focus of my talk, is that you've got to have good content. And this was, I think, really surprising to me. I've gotten used to users don't like more than 5 links at a time on a page. It's confusing, blah, blah, blah. His point was, the most popular websites you look at, Yahoo, Amazon, they have 100 to 200 links per page. People obviously like these. So, they don't like to scroll in length. They don't have time. Obviously, design has changed. And the other thing he stressed is to measure percentage of content versus your entire screen. If you look at your screen, look at how much of it is just purely for design fluff, and how much of it is actually useful. He said, metaphors are useless. They waste space. He said, if you have an icon, you have to tell people what it means underneath. Why have the icon? These are all good points. It's a wonderful website. If you get a chance, you should take a look at it. It has this Ask ET section, which is really interesting. People ask him questions, and he always answers them. He has these books that are just fabulous. If you ever have time. My personal favorite is this, let's see, envisioning information. And what's really interesting is he's working on another book. It's going to be kind of like a pamphlet, but it's on displaying evidence in a courtroom. So you'll have to keep your eye out for that. He does actually spend a lot of time working with evidence. So that's all I have on design. And my next section is on web programs. Once again, goal-oriented. Yeah.
I just had a quick question for you. Where are you getting all of your content for your site? Is that in-house? You have people writing all that stuff for you? Or?
And what I do is, and I guess I should have mentioned this, is you know, one thing I don't want is people making decisions about color or font size or any of those really nitty-gritty, detail-oriented things. So when I meet with people, I always talk to them about goals. What do you want to accomplish this year? And what I find is with administrators, it's a much easier conversation to have than trying to explain to them why they need a content management system on their back end. So what I do is I go in, I explain to them, what do you want? What are your goals? And then we talk about it, and then we discuss what are ways that we can get to that goal. And once we have ways of getting to that goal, then I start giving them suggestions on how they can reach those goals. And that usually comes up with a list of different types of content that I think they should probably provide in order to reach those goals. And then we harass them to that until they get to us. Which usually works, but not always. I mean, there are just some departments that are very good. But you can only do some. So, that's a good question. Web programming, once again, we have goals. The idea is to support the marketing goals again, but in an efficient manner. So if you remember, one of our goals was to keep the website interesting looking, to change it. And to do that, you have to simplify the updating process. And these are really, very simple things that I'm sure all of you are doing, but maybe not all together. And I was kind of surprised when I was looking through all of these that I was looking at different websites, and a lot of websites aren't even using cascading style sheets, which I think is a big mistake. The next time you change your design, you have to touch every single page on your website to change anything at all. So no wonder no wonder you don't update your websites. It's because it'd be incredibly difficult to do. Now, what we did was we switched entirely to external style sheets. And what this has done for us is, and server-side includes for all of our headers and footers. I'll explain what those are in a minute. I'm sure you know what they are. But basically, we have to change maybe 30 files altogether to change the look and feel of our entire website. Really simple. So, the pro is it separates the content from the presentation, so that I don't have to go in and touch any of the text. The con is there are a lot of browser compatibility issues. So I would say, limit it, limit your use to the really simple stuff. And if you've never seen it, this is just what it looks like. And there are different ways you can do it. You can actually embed it line by line, or you can embed it at the top of the page. Or what we've done is we put it externally in a separate file. So we have actually one style sheet that controls absolutely everything on our website. Server-side includes. Another easy thing to do. And basically, it allows you to include a document from somewhere else into whatever document you want. So what I was saying earlier, our headers and footers are actually all server-side includes. Now, you as a user, you don't see it because when you pull up the page, it just gives you the full page. But what the server is doing in the background is it's reading through or parsing through my document, and it says, oh, I need to include the header page. Goes out, grabs the header, puts it in. So what this means is I can reuse pieces of code. I've only got one header file. Well, I've got a couple because my headers do change with titles. But I do only have one footer file. So if we ever want to add anything to the footer, it's one file. The pro is, obviously, you get to reuse pieces of code. The con, it can slow down your server. So it depends on the quality of your server. We use the university server, and it's like, it's like 6 machines. They have no issues with speed. And it never goes down. I mean, very, very rarely. So it's a really robust machine. We just don't worry about it. And in fact, we just updated all of our faculty web pages, and to make it easy on ourselves, it actually has, strangely enough, 5 different server-side entries. One on top, one on bottom, one for the side, and one for the name of the professor. So we don't have to go in and change the title page of every single one of their pages. And it's saved us a tremendous amount of time. This is also an obvious one. You have information in a database, reuse it. We have a lot of this information sitting on our student information system, and we serve it out. We serve it out both on our portal and we serve it out on our public website. So we don't have to keep lists of books that students have to get. It's all on our mainframe. Yeah.
Jude, does that mean all the middleware and all this other stuff also resides on that central campus server, the whole thing? I mean,
yeah.
So you don't have to do any maintenance significantly then?
Zero. It's a really nice thing. The only bad drawback is, by relying on them, they're not really adventurous. So the problem is you have to live by their rules. So, for example, we would love to try playing with MySQL, but we can't because the university has deemed it too buggy and full of holes, and they refuse to do it. So, it's something we're working on. I negotiate with them regularly. And end result is, I think we're going to have to bring up our own MySQL server. But I don't plan to put anything really important on it, so if it does go down, it's not going to be such a big deal. But for the really important stuff, it's all going to sit on a resources. So the pro, really efficient. The con, you got to have somebody who can do it. This is just an example of how the university actually just recently went to a templating system, and they use 5 different server-side inputs. And one is the header and footer, and then they have 3 optional ones. And I'll show you what they are in a second. But basically, there's a spotlights and events section that's kind of on the right side. There's a site data. And this is really cool. It controls both the navigation bar on the left and the cookie crumb system on the top. I don't know if you've ever seen that. So you can tell where you are. And of course, there's something for non-JavaScript browsers. So let me just show you what some of these are. You can sort of see them. So here's a sample of one of them. And any department on campus can go in here and choose one of these designs, and all they have to do is change a few little files. And I think it's pretty professional looking, and it's very easy to use. So we're starting to implement the same thing on our site for our departments. PHP, there's a lot of different languages out there. We just happen to like PHP because it's got it's cheap, it's free, and it happens to be installed on our servers, so we can actually use it without harassing anyone. And it's just embedded into the HTML code. I mean, it's really not anything special. It's not. I mean, it's just kind of like JavaScript. And you can do almost anything with it, including the server-side things I was just talking about. So, the con is to do really high-level PHP programming. I found that you really do need to spend a lot of time learning it. But the really simple stuff, very easy. And there are lots of tutorials online. You can just run through it. I know a lot of you are doing PHP things. I mean, just to give you some idea, this was a chart for PHP usage from 1999 to May 2002. It's really popular. This is our project that we did in PHP, and the data is stored in XML format. And basically what it does is, I don't know if any of you know this diversity, but he really likes to know where his employees are at all times. So that if he needs them, he can find them. So this used to be done by email, so that anybody who was going to be gone for like an hour or 2 out of the office, you actually had to send out an email to everybody and say, I'm going to be gone from 3 to 5 today. And every morning you would get an email saying, and these are the people who are going to be out today during these times. It was okay, but really annoying. I mean, how many emails can you take? So we built this system for them. And, mostly it was because we really wanted to see what doing PHP and XML was like. But it was just, a simple, limited project that we thought wouldn't kill us. And what was really cool about it is we were able to use the university's authentication system. So once again, a single sign-on, UTE-ID. We didn't have to force everybody to learn yet another password and login. And of course, the pro is open source coding. Fewer server reliability issues. We looked at possibly doing this in Cold Fusion and Access, and we probably could have done it in a lot less time. But the problem is the Cold Fusion server is down all the time because the university doesn't really care about it. But the web server is up 99.999, 6% of the time. And that's where the PHP stuff sits. So this is a big reason why we went with PHP. The con, it's XML. There's no database. It's record locking issues. Somebody's got a record and they're editing it. How do you keep somebody else from editing it at the same time? It's kind of a problem, but it's an outlist. How many people are simultaneously going to request the same record and edit it? Very few. There are only 40 people in the library. So it's really just not a big issue given our implementation. I'm sure there are ways that we could get around this if we do put it into a bigger application later on. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is that there's not much documentation for doing PHP in it. So a lot of this, this is lovely.
Looks like it's a little less than 99.9.
Oh yes, it is. Thank you. Human error.
Simple user error.
Should have known.
Years ago, 90%.
I forgot the yes.
Exactly. Absolutely.
This is what it looks like. I already logged in earlier, so it's still got me in there. But basically, it tells you exactly who's in, who's out. Well, it doesn't tell you who's in, but it does tell you who's out. It gives you the reference schedule, and it tells you if there are any special library events for the day. The library loves this. So anybody who's going to be out just comes in here and fills out one of these lovely leave request forms. We allow other people to fill in because if you're sick at home, you probably don't want to get online and fill this out, so you can call in and somebody else will fill it out for you. And if you notice, there's actually an approval process. So if you see the status, approved, we have a whole built-in supervisor tree that determines who gets to approve what. And it's really amazing. So when an employee requests something, an email is sent to the supervisor, you need to request, you need to approve this. But actually, it appears immediately on the list, and it just says, I forgot what it says, pending, yes. So it says pending, and then as soon as it's approved, it goes into the queue status. there are any changes made, emails are sent out. I mean, it's really fairly robust system. And reference schedule, I don't think I can even enter a reference schedule, only two people can. So the reference schedule is easy to enter as well as the events. And just to give you an idea of what it looks like, oh, we even have an employee information section. So people can decide whether or not they want to release their information. And of course, supervisors have full access to any supervising instructions. This is the XML record of one worker, and this is just her employee information record. As you can see, it's stored in XML. So what are we planning for the horizon? We're looking at Flash MX, and I know I said I really hate Flash, but I also really hate doing 4 versions of the exact same thing. We don't have 4 versions, but we have to make all of the adjustments, so that somebody with Netscape 4 can look at it just as well as somebody with IE6. We had to make a lot of adjustments, and with Flash, you don't have that problem. When you have one version, all platforms, it works everywhere. It's also ADA compliant. On Windows IE, it has pre-built components so that if you want to include things like scroll bars, whatever is easier to put in. Macromedia is making a big university push. I think you will probably see it at your campus soon. I know our campus is looking to sign a gigantic agreement with them, which will allow us to purchase all Macromedia products for $15. But basically, the idea is to push all web programming to MX. So this is a big deal. Plus, it's integrated with all Macromedia products, Fireworks. It all talks to each other, and of course, it talks to Cold Fusion, which is a Macromedia product. What's neat is if you have files in XML. So like in the future, we can actually take our little library outputs, put a Flash MX front end on it, and it'll actually read the XML records that we have them stored. And just to give you an idea, this is, I just thought this was kind of neat. This is their version of, their view of what a portal could look like using Flash MX.
Think of that. But I think of that.
And what's neat about this is that each one of these little squares is an individual application. They run separately and independently of each other, and this is the really cool part here, I can drag it around.
So you think this thing's going to fly?
So, talk about customizability. This is the ultimate. XML. I mean, I just think this is the neatest thing. It's the thing I like about it the most is it's a standards base. Anybody can use it. We're not locked into any particular database company. The problem with it is it's not compatible with most browsers, unfortunately. But someday, I'm hoping down the line it'll be a lot more robust. But what I'm finding is that most databases today are starting to include XML natively within their own database. I know Oracle's doing so. Our mainframe system, they're looking at privileging the product that it allows you to integrate XML files into our mainframe system very easily. So it's, I think it's something that's going to become more and more common. Now, last but not least, you've done all this great work. You've got to be able to show something before. This is a really important step. If people don't know that what you're doing has an impact, you may not have a job for very long. So accountability, really important. What we do for this is I look at web statistics all the time. Granted, what does it really mean? Yes, you can get into all these arguments about, well, what does a number mean? But I look at it over time. So for me, the value is looking at this number last week compared to 3 months ago before we did this, or 8 months ago before we did that. How it compares to dude, I don't really care. Because what I need to show is the difference that I've made.
Excuse me?
The other thing that we do is we do a lot of focus groups. We also do a lot of online surveys. And, just walking around the halls, listening to specific comments, we get emails all the time. When we put up Fresh Law Central, we got tons of emails from students just saying, wow, this is so great, I love this. And this is kind of a weird thing, but if you've never looked at the Princeton Review discussion board, it's really fascinating. If you want to know what prospective students think about your law school, this is a really interesting place to know. Right now, if you look at it, most of the discussions are really stupid, but during the period of time when they're actually looking and trying to decide where to go, that's lovely. What you want to do is look at this discussion section, the top right corner there. And as I said, be warned, I have not previewed this. It could be bad. But, as I said, there's not a lot of intelligent discussion at this point because they still haven't decided where they're going. But what you can do, and this is interesting, is that if you want to search, you can't actually use the search button. You have to use the options button. So you're learning something really important today. Look at the options button, and down here at the bottom, it'll actually allow you to search. So what I can do is I can search for the word Texas over the last 30 days.
You should add law to that.
It's all law, so it doesn't matter. And I can see what students are saying about Texas. And what's fascinating to me are these, like Texas versus Vanderbilt. And what I found is that every time we put up a new news story, invariably it gets quoted here. We put up a news story about we hired away from NYU this constitutional law professor, and I saw one of the Texas versus NYU threads. Well, look at this story. There are lots and lots of these things. Invariably, I'll find our news stories posted on this somewhere. Or, a lot of times, these people, when they discuss different law schools, they will point you to different websites. Well, look at this, and look at that, and look at this website. So, in fact, one of the latest was Harvard. There were complaints about Harvard's class size. And I guess Harvard had just posted a story last couple of weeks ago about how they had discontinued their English curriculum, and they were now down to 80 students per section. So once again, if you think that people aren't reading, you're very wrong. So, anyway, sorry, I don't really have a lot of good questions. But do you have any? Yeah. I have 2 web programmers and I have 3 databases on them. They do all the mainframe, administrative, database stuff. They support student registration. Everything is just so that's what it does.